Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Oh, those singers are correct. This is WMAL, and they did it in harmony, too. Thanks for tuning in here at 5:06 this morning. It's Wednesday. That means coming up at 6:35, we'll talk to Cal Thomas, syndicated columnist. 7:05, people are voting. So are you confident with what's going to happen with your ballot after it goes through the little counting machine? Well, let's try to instill a little confidence there. J. Christian Adams, president of the Public Interest Legal Foundation, is going to join us to talk about a lot of things going on right now across the country in various jurisdictions that could affect the validity of our election process. 7:35, Brendan Carr, FCC commissioner, on the fact that George Soros has now purchased a huge number of radio stations, including some talk radio stations, and the FCC has fast-tracked this so the purchase can be done before Election Day. 8:05, we'll talk to former Trump administration official Peter Navarro on a whole host of economic issues as Donald Trump was canvassing the battleground states yesterday, talking about the economy, rally after rally after rally. That's all coming up this morning. It's Larry O'Connor, and that right there, that's Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm okay, but I'm feeling good. I like what the polls are telling me right now. Quinnipiac just came out with a national poll, and again, we don't really focus too much on national polls because that's not how we elect presidents in this country. But people tell me, and I trust them, that this is an indicator on how the general mood of the nation is and what the direction these battleground states might take depending on the sampling in these polls. And it's definitely telling if the Republican is in the lead because even when Republicans win the White House, they've only won the popular vote once since, the 80s, right? It was 2004 was the last time a Republican won the White House. Excuse me, did I say 84? I meant 2004. George W. Bush won the popular vote, the national popular vote, and he won the presidency. Before that, you got to go all the way back to his dad in 1988. So, and that's just the quirk of the way we elect presidents here with the Electoral College system, because New York and California, two of the most populous states in our nation, rack up the numbers in that popular vote, right? So, national polls, national popularity polls aren't a clear indicator. But if a Republican's leading that, that's bad news for Democrats. That's, I guess, my point. And the latest Quinnipiac poll, hitting yesterday, exactly 6 weeks before Election Day, tells us that Donald Trump has a 1 percentage point lead over Kamala Harris in that national poll. And that is starting to have a ripple effect as well in the border state, battleground states, I should say, which are also border states, thanks to this administration's border security policy. Right now, if you look at Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, those three states that ostensibly could decide the election, it's a dead heat, according to all of the polls that have been averaged out over the last several weeks, which, by the way, also reinforces our position that we held immediately after the debate, that it's not really going to make a big difference. Everyone in Washington, D.C. had their hair setting on fire. Every pundit that was on television, whether they were right-leaning or left-leaning, all said, that's it, Kamala Harris won it, it's over. It's over, right? Oh, my God, the panic after that debate. And you and we were looking at it, and we're like, I don't see how this makes a difference, really, actually. The greatest indication that debate didn't make a difference and that Kamala Harris did not win that debate is that she's begging for another debate. What does that tell you?
She is. And because it's almost as though she thinks, if I get another debate, I'll finally get that bump. Or
I'll get more positive media coverage.
Yes, exactly. Right. Because I'm not talking to the media.
Right.
So this is the way to generate it, that earned media. I find her losses, and I say this cautiously because it's not really that Trump is winning with minority voters, but she is not winning as many as Biden did.
She's way behind. In that
way behind
those demographics.
Where she still has something like 80-something% of the Black and Hispanic vote, but it's below what Biden had, which was, I guess, in the 90s or something. So that's interesting to me, and it's you can dismiss Hollywood and you can dismiss kind of these weird comments that Hollywood makes, but Janet Jackson's comments about her, and then not backing down. Janet Jackson, as you know, she said, she's not really Black. And then she did sort of, suggest some sort of conspiratorial stuff about Kamala Harris. But I mean, that doesn't help that situation.
Yeah.
And the fact that Kamala just comes off as so disingenuous. Yeah, it's not looking good for her.
Julie, I forgot all of the reaction from the media calling Janet Jackson racist for saying that. Did we catch that? Because that's what we're supposed to say. I thought that's. Anyway, so so you asked me how I'm feeling, and my answer to you is I'm actually cautiously optimistic. People keep coming to me and say, "What do you think about the election?" And you know I hate making predictions, and I'm not going to make a prediction. But I can tell you where we are right now, and where we are right now is that every single time Donald Trump has run for president, this is his third time running for president. This is the best he's ever been in polling and in strategy going into election day. Where are we? 6 weeks out, 41 days now before Election Day. He's never had this strong a position going into an Election Day. And of the two other times, one of those elections he won, and the other election, Joe Biden prevailed based on the rules that were set forth in administering and counting the ballots that were cast in that election. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling cautiously optimistic. That's why I'm looking very intently at headlines that go by about the process of validating and counting ballots. I don't want to do this the day after the election. I don't want to, on Wednesday morning when they're still counting ballots, I don't want to play catch up here and say, well, what decisions did they make, 2 months ago about these ballots that are affecting us now? That's why we're getting into it right now. That's why J. Christian Adams is going to join us later in the show. And here's a headline from the Associated Press that should send a chill up your spine. Several states are making late changes to election rules, even as voting is set to begin.
Ugh.
Why are we changing the rules right now? Why? And if you're a candidate,
because they're panicked.
You're a candidate for president. You're a candidate for any elected office, and you set up your what they call the ground game. Mm-hmm. You set up your campaign infrastructure, and their whole mandate in your ground game is to get excitement, to get people to cast their ballots for you. Make sure that they send in the mail-in ballot. Make sure that they deliver the drop box ballot. Make sure that they set a plan to go do early voting or to go vote on Election Day, and you're on top of it, and you're spending a lot of money. You need to know what the rules are to be able to set up your ground game. You need to know what your personnel needs to look like, how many people you need to hire, what rules they have to operate under, what their strategy is going to be. And we're 6 weeks out, and they're still changing the rules in some of these states.
And also, what does this do for voter confidence? What does this do for confidence in the election itself if these state officials are messing with things right at the last minute? That conveys a message of could have been tampered with, right?
And I know, listen, I always rely on J. Christian Adams, who will be our guest later in the program. He's joining us at 7:05. And Hans von Spakovsky, an expert who works at Heritage Foundation. I get frustrated when I see that every state has these different rules. Like, for instance, we had Governor Glenn Youngkin on last week when we started early voting. And he said, I want all the Virginians to know that we do not have electronic voting machines. Every single ballot is a paper ballot. It's cast by hand. We just have electric voting counting machines. We have machines that will count the ballots. Mm-hmm. Now, in Georgia, they have just set a new rule that says that election workers are going to have to hand count the ballots cast after voting is completed. Now that doesn't mean they're going to have to hand count and put, okay, this is how many for Trump, this is how many for Kamala. What they're going to do is count how many ballots were cast to make sure that the tabulation in the machines matches so that there's no ballots that are undercounted or ballots overcounted, okay? But that's the Georgia rule. Does Virginia have that rule? I don't know. Should Virginia have that rule? I don't know. It drives me nuts. And the experts all say you want every state to have their own rules. You don't want Washington, D.C. to decide this. And I understand the logic behind that. But at the same time, it's very frustrating when you see a state like Florida that seems to have their stuff together, be able to deliver the results of that giant, diverse state within 3 hours of the polls closing. And then you've got Arizona, which has less than half the population of Florida, and they take a week to do the counting. And I've got more, but I want to go through some of these changes that have happened and some of the other decisions that are being made right now at the 11th hour as voting is even happening. And we want you to know about it. We want you to be aware of what's going on so that we're not playing catch up after the fact. First, though, it's 5:15.
Yeah.
Making sense of the news.
Live
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
So the Associated Press leads off their article here. In Georgia, election workers will have to hand count the number of ballots cast after voting is complete. In North Carolina, some students and university staff can use their digital IDs to vote. In Wisconsin, ballot drop boxes are legal again, although not every voting jurisdiction in Wisconsin will use ballot drop boxes. Across the country, including in some of the nation's presidential swing states, new or recently altered state laws are changing how Americans will vote, tally ballots, and administer and certify November's election. And they turn to this election expert Voting Rights Lab, which I'm very suspicious of that name, saying last-minute changes to election rules, whether from a state legislature, an election authority, or a court, can lead to confusion for voters and election officials. Hold on. This is what also bothers me. Our Constitution is very clear. The way to determine the electors that will participate in the presidential electoral college will be determined by state legislatures. That's very specific in the Constitution. So the state legislature, through that body, will vote on how the electoral college is determined for any given state. So why are, as she said, whether from a state legislature, an election authority, or a court? No, the election authorities and courts shouldn't have a say in this. The only reason a court should have a say is if in some way the state legislature has violated the state or federal constitution in determining how the electoral college is elected. Otherwise, they shouldn't have a say in it. And certainly an unelected election authority shouldn't be able to change something that the state legislature laid out. This is what just breaks my brain sometimes, and too often we find out about it after Election Day.
Well, Larry, we know that the left hates the Electoral College. We know that there are efforts afoot to do away with it. I mean, we have been battling this at IWF. Our law center churns out tons of information on the Electoral College, from how to explain it to your kids to just briefs and other explainers to lectures, to talks that we've given, because a lot of people are confused about what the Electoral College is and how it works and why it's so important. And we know the left sees the Electoral College as a problem, right, because it doesn't always ensure their ascension to power.
They hate it. They want to do away with it. They think it's unconstitutional. So every time they come up with a new rule that affects how that state determines the electors, the Electoral College, I'm immediately suspicious of it, because I know they don't have good intentions. They've already told me they don't have good intentions. They told me that they hate it.
Yes.
So this is all. And again, so take it down to Georgia. In Georgia and Arizona, by the way, election workers will do hand counts at polling sites on Election Day. Now, and by the way, they say that might delay the results from coming in.
Here we go. Yeah.
The Georgia State Election Board passed the new rule Friday. It requires that the number of ballots, not the number of votes, be counted by hand at each polling place by 3 separate poll workers until all 3 counts are the same. Georgia voters make selections on touchscreen voting machines, and then those machines print out paper ballots. Those ballots include a list of the selections so voters can verify their accuracy. And then a scanner will tally the votes. Proponents say the new hand count rule is needed to make sure the number of paper ballots that get spit out by these machines match the electronic tallies on the scanners, the check-in computers, and the voting machines. That makes sense. There should be a check, right? This number of people checked in. The machines say this number of people voted, and yet we have this number of paper ballots. Why is there a discrepancy? There shouldn't be. This hand count should add to that, to the mix, and be able to reconcile those discrepancies, but it's also going to delay the process. And why does it have to delay the process? Why isn't there an easier way? Add to that, Julie Gunlock, if I can just continue blithering at you about all of these different laws. Non-citizens have been added to states' voter rolls. Now, we know that. This has happened through the DMV.
Yes.
We warned about it when the Clintons and the Democrats pushed for motor voter. And you ask anybody who really is honest about election integrity, and I mean like our guest at 7 o'clock, J. Christian Adams, or Hans von Spakovsky, or anybody who knows what they're talking about, they'll say the original sin in all of this, the Eve handing Adam the apple to eat on election integrity, was motor voter, motor voter, motor voter. The Clintons have playing the long game here with the Democrats since the mid-'90s.
And Larry, we know that they've weaponized some federal agencies. The Veterans Administration is now, trying to register veterans, but only Democrats.
Of course.
There's evidence of this.
Of course. So hundreds and hundreds of non-citizens who should not be voting have been added to the voter rolls through the DMV. And this is even after they admit, if you've gotten your license recently, you have to answer a bunch of questions. And if it asks you if you're a citizen, if you say no, it'll still say, would you like to register to vote? And this has happened in Pennsylvania. So J. Christian Adams he's been fighting the fight in Pennsylvania for years now, trying to get those voter rolls cleaned up. He's going to join us at 7:05. We'll get to that, too. I know this is frustrating. It's frustrating for us, too. That's why talking it through and getting the facts out there make this a lot less frustrating so that we know what we're dealing with. And that's why you're here, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. Make sure you're here at 7:05 to hear this all laid out with J. Christian Adams. Right now, it's 5:23.
Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:37. Thanks for tuning in here this Wednesday morning. We can't wait to deliver everything you need to hear today and want to hear and want to laugh about as well, by the way. We're trying to have fun here. I feel bad, Julie Gunlock, because we were very intense there in our first half hour about where we're headed with ballots and elections, just because I just want us to have our eyes wide open as we're going.
People care about this stuff, Larry. I think it's okay. Yeah.
It's 6:35. Cal Thomas will join us. 7:05, as we've been mentioning, J. Christian Adams, Public Interest Legal Foundation, on what's going on with ballots and voting integrity. 7:35, Brendan Carr, Commissioner of the FCC, about Soros buying up a whole ton of radio stations and the FCC fast-tracking that. And at 8:05, Peter Navarro will join us. That's Julie Gunlock. I am Larry O'Connor, and Julia, Kamala Harris has finally announced one policy position for her election that she cares very strongly about. What's interesting, though, is that it's not something a president has any control over. So, it's like pulling teeth to find out what exactly she intends to do or what her plan is to do. She'll say, I'm going to bring down prices. That's how I'm going to affect inflation. She won't tell you how she's going to do that, though. We'll go after corporate price gouging. It's like, wait, aren't there already laws against that? And do you have evidence that price gouging has anything to do with inflation? But
one of the best moments this last week was watching one of Kamala's surrogates. She was on Fox News, and I don't think we have the clip, but she was stumbling and bumbling and clearly having trouble talking about this fix for price gouging when price gouging is not happening.
Yes.
These grocery stores work on such a small margin. It is absurd to suggest it, but that's all she's given her surrogates to work with. Well, this is the solution.
And when Martha McCallum kept pointing that out to her on Fox News, she accused Martha McCallum of being sexist. So you get all that. That's good. All right. That said, Kamala Harris has finally announced something that she feels very strongly about that she wants to do if she's elected president, which is to change a rule in the Senate, which, of course, she has no control over as president of the United States. But here's what she told Wisconsin Public Radio.
Now to abortion, you've said you want to work with Congress to pass a federal bill to codify abortion rights. How do you plan to get enough support in Congress to restore abortion rights when you'd likely need to pass a Senate filibuster? You'd have potential legal hurdles.
Well, let me first say to all your listeners, you must reelect your Senator Tammy Baldwin, because we need the votes in Congress to do exactly what you are saying, and that's true. And it is well within our reach to hold on to the majority in the Senate and take back the House. And so I would also emphasize that while the presidential election is extremely important and dispositive of where we go moving forward, it also is about what we need to do to hold on to the Senate and win seats in the House. That being said, I've been very clear. I think we should eliminate the filibuster for Roe, and we need and get us to the point where 51 votes would be what we need to actually put back in law.
All right, so she wants to do away with the filibuster.
You can see the bullet points on that.
Yeah.
On that,
she's reading the card in front of her.
Can you just see that? Like it says, first talk about Tammy Baldwin, right? You can just see the talking point.
But the crux of it is she wants to get rid of the filibuster in the Senate. So you only need a 51 vote majority to do something as monumentally earth-shattering as this.
I think we should eliminate the filibuster.
And let's just be clear. this is a plan. Here's what happens when you get rid of the filibuster. You end the filibuster, then you pack the Supreme Court. Then you only need a one-vote majority in the House and a one-vote majority of the Senate to change the makeup of the Supreme Court to be 15 people. Then whoever the president happens to be fills all those brand new seats, those six new seats.
Yep.
And you don't need a filibuster to get them approved through the Senate and confirmed through the Senate. So they'll do that. Then they'll vote for statehood for the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico, thus giving them 4 more Democrat senators.
They'll get what they love to call immigration reform through.
And then they'll vote for amnesty. That amnesty will then give citizenship to the tens of millions of illegal immigrants that they have willfully brought into this country over the course of the last several years. All of that happens when you get rid of the filibuster. They'll say that this is about abortion, but that's exactly what they plan to do. Both independent so-called senators who caucus with the Democrats in the current makeup of the Senate, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, have decried this. Joe Manchin publicly said that now there's no way that he can endorse or support Kamala Harris.
He didn't just say, I'm not going to endorse. He said, shame on her. He said she knows the filibuster is the holy grail of democracy. It is the only thing that keeps us talking and working together. If she gets rid of that, then it would be the House on steroids. So he's not happy.
Yeah, but see, from Kamala Harris's perspective, and again, the only way that she can win the election is to focus on all of the things other than the fundamentals that the American people care about the most right now. Things like the economy and the cost of living and national security and border security and amnesty and crime in the streets and 3 international awards that weren't there 3 years ago and all those other things. So she'll focus on abortion because she thinks that riles up female voters in the suburbs. And she'll focus on January 6th. And these are 2 things that the majority of voters actually don't rate very high as being important to them. And so that's what she's going to do. And that's why this conversation is now happening. It is remarkable to me, though, that here's a woman who was in the Senate. And when she was in the Senate, she actually joined her colleagues signing a letter proclaiming the filibuster to be a sacrosanct rule that should never be modified.
Another flip-flop. I'm shocked, Larry.
It is
shocked.
Absolutely shocking to me. But listen, it doesn't make it. You are given a free pass by the left and by the media to change any position you've ever had at any time, as long as you end up supporting the killing of babies in the womb. That's the bottom line. Are you a hypocrite? Sure. But if you're a hypocrite on the side of killing those babies, then they'll applaud. Are you kidding? They'll reward you for it.
Oh, yeah.
It's 5:43.
You've heard the news. Now get the facts. It's the Vince Colonnese Show, weekdays 3 to 6, right here on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Joe Biden, pathetic, empty shell of a man and doomed, failed one-term president who couldn't even muster up the energy to try to win a second term. He appeared at the United Nations yesterday and said one of the most atrocious, bald-faced, disingenuous lies that a president can say.
When I came to office as president, Afghanistan had replaced Vietnam as America's longest war. I was determined to end it, and I did. It was a hard decision, but the right decision. 4 American presidents had faced that decision, but I was determined not to leave it to the 5th.
First of all, a nice backhanded smack at his buddy Barack Obama there, number 1. Number 2, absolutely disgusting and insulting to not acknowledge the fact that it was Donald Trump who put the wheels in motion in very real and significant ways to get this pull out of Afghanistan happening during the first year in office. It was already in motion. In fact, what happened was Joe Biden wanted to make it his own, so he upended Trump's methodical and goals-based plan to separate the troops out of Afghanistan. He came up with his own way of doing it in May, and that led to the debacle that we saw in August. All right, but that being said, listen to this next part.
It was a decision accompanied by tragedy. 13 brave Americans lost their lives, along with hundreds of Afghans, in a suicide bomb. I think those lost lives, I think them every day.
Wow. What what a scum. I'm sorry.
I know. I know.
You ask the Gold Star families of those 13 service members who died at Abbey Gate. They'll tell you that the last time they saw this guy was when he was checking his watch.
Yes.
During the dignified transfer of remains at Dover. He hasn't taken a meeting with them. He hasn't talked to them. He hasn't called them. He hasn't done a damn thing for them. In fact, this is the first time I remember him even publicly acknowledging the loss of those 13 service members since the event itself. He's had State of the Union after State of the Union after State of the Union. He just ran for president in a failed, pathetic attempt. In fact, at the debate in June, he said this.
We were this safe country. The truth is, I'm the only president this century that doesn't have this decade, that doesn't have any troops dying anywhere in the world like he did.
Can you imagine being one of those mothers?
In June, he said he either his brain is broken or he just lied that he didn't have any troops die while he was president. He said that in June.
Yeah.
And then just yesterday,
13 brave Americans lost their lives along with hundreds of Afghans in a suicide bomb. I think those lost lives, I think them every day.
He didn't think about them on the day of the debate.
You know, Larry, we have talked about for years, I've been in this city for over 20 years and you've been here for a long time as well. And we've always tried to remind people that Biden was a bad guy. He's not some cuddly, sweet teddy bear, old charming guy.
Oh, cute Uncle Joe.
No, he's a bad dude. And he's been a bad dude for a lot of years. He's a blowhard. He's a narcissist. And this is another example of just how cruel he is. That he ignores these families, he ignores these brave soldiers who died in Afghanistan, and then to score political points, to go out looking like this, this man who cares. He makes that statement. It's despicable.
Yeah, it absolutely is despicable and an obvious lie. And you're right. He is a bad man. And I've been mentioning every single time anybody says, Joe Biden, he's so likable, he's so moderate. I just say, ask Clarence Thomas's family what they think of Joe Biden. Ask the late Robert Bork's family what they think about Joe Biden. Ask people who worked with him in the Senate what they think about him. They'll be pretty honest with you. From their fruits you will know them, and we've certainly seen his rotten fruits.
Yeah, I urge people sometimes when I have these conversations to go back and look at the funeral of Tom Lantos, a Holocaust survivor who served as a member of Congress from California, and he had this sort of storied career as in foreign policy, and many people admired Tom Lantos for his history and his family story, but Biden gave his obituary, or I'm sorry, spoke at his funeral, his eulogy, and made it all about himself. All about himself. It was astonishing. I watched it in real time.
That's what he always does, and that's what he's doing here in this UN speech. If you think about it, it's not even about those 13 members.
Right.
It's about how he thinks about them every day.
13 brave Americans lost their lives along with hundreds of Afghans in a suicide bomb. I think those lost lives, I think them every day.
Think about him every day. Well, I think about him every day, too. And you know what I thought yesterday? I thought I was going to see his Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, who apparently was the point person in the decision-making process on that pullout, including that day when the Abbey Gate suicide bombing massacre occurred. I thought I was going to see Antony Blinken under oath answering questions before a House committee that wanted to get to the bottom of this. They've questioned the Pentagon. The Pentagon has said, listen, we put the plan together. It got rejected. We had to come up with a new plan. And the State Department was calling the shots. So now the State Department was there. They were supposed to answer the questions. He got subpoenaed. Antony Blinken refused to appear. On the same day that Joe Biden's standing there at the UN saying, I think about those 13 service members every single day, the guy that works for Joe Biden, who carried out his policies and engineered the scene that led to Abbey Gate, refused to show up to a congressional subpoena. By the way, later in the program, we have a man who also refused to appear at a congressional subpoena before the January 6th Commission, Peter Navarro. He got jailed for not showing up. I'd love to ask Peter Navarro about Antony Blinken not showing up for his day in Congress yesterday. And we'll do just that later in the show. It's 5:53.